Alright, we are back, of course, talking that FF7. Today was the Echoes of Midgar panel at MCM Comic Con London. We had Noaki Hamaguchi, Brianna White, Barret, John Eric Bentley, and Paul Tenso, and the usual suspects at these events, and I do appreciate them for doing this shit all the time. As always, I do kind of wish Cody Christian or Tyler Hoechlin or some other people that are kind of prominent in the game would do these kinds of panels, but I guess maybe they're busy, I don't know. I actually do have a recording of the entire panel, courtesy of our boy TranceKuja over on Twitter, also TranceKuja on YouTube. So shout out to them for hooking me up with the video. We haven't done one of these panel videos in a while, where we kind of like watch like a long ass panel with some of the voice actors and shit, and kind of break it down, talk about what's worth being talked about. We go into them usually blind. I do know that towards the end of this panel, Hamaguchi kind of teases part 3 shit, like the release date. Obviously, he doesn't give it to us. Clearly, he wouldn't give it to us yet. But that's kind of the only thing I'm aware of. Other than that, no idea what they talk about. So as usual with this type of shit, I'll watch it off camera and we'll come back and talk about things that are worth being talked about. So luckily for us, TranceKuja's got some front row seats, so the video quality is pretty damn good. So the first question the host asks is about, their relationship with Final Fantasy. Of course, we know with Hamaguchi, he's a fan first, now he's a developer. And they kind of pass it on to John Eric Bentley next. And it's kind of a funny little exchange where he gets the crowd riled up a bit and the host makes a comment about that's why he's Barret.
Anyone else? Take your choice. Who wants to go first? John, you've been nominated.
Yeah, Brianna always kicks me out there. So. First of all, what's up, y'all? How y'all doing? You gotta do that. You gotta get them all up into it.
That's why you are this guy. That's why you are Barret.
Yeah, I mean, okay. I'm a Richie son. Thank you.
I think there's a decent amount of truth to that, because I kind of get that vibe from John when I see him in interviews with some of the other voice actors, kind of this like leader sort of thing. Father figure kind of mentality. He might be like the eldest of some of the voice actors, at least with like the main group cast, right? So like there's like a level of truth to that. Like that's why he's Barret. Like he just fits that role perfectly. But yeah, he talks about how he played Final Fantasy VII back in the day. His wife was getting mad at him for playing it too much and stuff. But he also said it was like his first RPG. He also says it's the first RPG with a brother in it, a black guy obviously, that didn't die. I don't know if there's truth to that or not. I have no idea. I don't know the history of like the Final Fantasy series. I haven't played through all of the ones before FF7. Now, very recently, I did play through Final Fantasy I with the Pixel Remasters. And I'm going to kind of slowly go through and play them all. So I don't know if there's like previous Final Fantasies that had a black guy in it that dies or something. Maybe there is. I don't know.
For me, I played the OG when I was younger, and my wife got mad at me because I stayed on it for too long. First RPG with a brother, and he didn't die, and I was thrilled about it. So that's how I got hooked in it.
But there was a time in development for FF7 where like everybody but Cloud or your main party was going to die or something along those lines. And I think it might have been player choice, but there was a time potentially where, Barret might have died, I guess, in the original FF7. But obviously he didn't, which is fantastic. They tease it with Remake, of course, when he gets fucking stabbed in the Shinner building and then the Whispers like save him or whatever. But if Barret actually died, I would fucking boycott the game. As for Brianna White, she does say that she's never played the original, which I'd never known her like history when it comes to gaming in general, much less Final Fantasy. But she does say she started with Final Fantasy XIV, she played Final Fantasy XV, and then obviously got the role for Aerith for Final Fantasy VII Remake. I know since Remake and stuff's come out, I know she's like streamed Remake and Rebirth and also Crisis Core. But John does kind of like correct her a bit, if you want to call it that, where they have played a little bit of the original together on one of her streams, apparently.
Played a stream with me.
It's true.
I'm gonna tell you straight up, she just lied to everybody in this room. Tease, I'm joking. No, okay, I'm just exaggerating the truth. She did play the OG, and we had a stream on the Twitch channel.
Yeah.
That was my introduction into who Breezy really was. Love her.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun. If you want to go see it, it's on my YouTube channel. But we played the first, what would you say, like hour of the original?
About an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Got into it.
So that was a lot of fun.
To be honest, I've never really watched any of Brianna's streams, but the fact that she has like an hour and a half playthrough of the beginning of FF7 with John, I might actually look that up and watch that sometime. As for Barret, who of course voices Tifa, I've never known her like history at all with gaming. I don't know if I've ever watched any panel where she's talked about like her history with FF7 or anything like that. But much like Brianna, she also came from like a Nintendo family, so they didn't have a PlayStation growing up. But she says that her first kind of experience with Final Fantasy was like commercials for Kingdom Hearts on Disney.
I was also in a Nintendo family growing up, if we're being honest. So I was only familiar from the Kingdom Hearts commercials on the Disney Channel growing up, where I'd be like, I know, yeah. I'm like, I know Donald Duck, I know Mickey, who's the guy with the weird hair?
Initially, I assumed she was talking about Sora, but maybe they show Cloud in the trailers. I actually haven't watched the Kingdom Hearts 1 trailer. I don't know how many fucking years at this point. So maybe they show Cloud in the trailers, and that would make some sense, right? But I want to highlight this too for that reason, because like So one of the things I bitch about a lot with Kingdom Hearts 3, right? They know Final Fantasy characters at all, and it's like, for some people out there, like Britt Baron, for example, who voices fucking Tifa Lockhart in the remake games, like, their introductions to Final Fantasy was through Kingdom Hearts. And the fact for Kingdom Hearts 3 not to have any Final Fantasy characters in it at all, at least in the base game, was very frustrating for me, because that's a big part of why I played the franchise too. But for a lot of people out there, them playing Kingdom Hearts, because maybe they like the Disney characters or something like that, might have got them into playing the Final Fantasy games. And to not have any in Kingdom Hearts 3 was just kind of dumb. Also mentioned she didn't really know what like the fandom was like and stuff until she was cast, and really not until she started going to conventions and getting to meet people and shit. And Paul Tinto was kind of in the same position. Now, he did have a PlayStation growing up, but he's playing like Medal of Honor and Tekken, and he was kind of aware of Final Fantasy VII. His friends or something played it. But he's also kind of going into the recording booth sort of blind and not really knowing what he's getting into.
I had a few friends that played Final Fantasy. I was playing Medal of Honor and a bit of Tekken. And then, so when the game came along, I kind of knew of it, but I had no idea what I was getting myself in for.
He was recording for a while and taking his NDA seriously, but he did eventually go to his cousin to like talk about the character he was voicing, and his cousin did know what FF7 was, and like kind of panic set in because he realized like how major of a character he was voicing. Now, I don't know that, you know, Cait Sith is necessarily like a popular or fan favorite character, right? He's not a lot of people did like him in the original FF7, but because he's a character of FF7, that makes him, you know, popular in that regard.
When I turned up into the booth the first day, I thought I was just recording maybe for a couple of weeks. I was taking my NDA seriously because they said, please don't publicise this. 6 months down the line, I go to my cousin who's a gamer, and I'm like, look man, do you play Final Fantasy? And his eyes kind of light up, and then I tell him who I'm playing. He sees panic come into my eyes because he's suddenly like, yeah man, everyone's going to know who you are. So that was my introduction to the game.
I will say though, I like Cait Sith way more in Rebirth than I did ever in the original FF7, right? Obviously, the Shinra, like, lab underneath the Shinra Manor where you're throwing the boxes, a lot of people have, like, thoughts on that when it comes to Rebirth. I definitely hated it the first time. I didn't really mind it my second playthrough on, like, hard mode and shit. Just kind of whatever. But I will say just, like, the character of Cait Sith is a lot more interesting and pretty fun to use, actually, when it comes to Rebirth. I'll say there's definitely a time where we talked about on the channel that I was of the mindset that I preferred that, like, the voice actors had played the original game or had knowledge of the original game. These days, I don't really give a shit, right? My mindset's changed on that. I don't really care. The performance is going to be the performance, right? These are wonderful voice actors. It matters not if they play the original FF7, right? The host goes on to ask them with their various levels of knowledge of the game, right? John's played it before. The rest of the cast that's on stage hasn't really played it, at least before the voice roles, right? We've heard John talk about it before. Like, he didn't want, you know, the stereotypical angry black man, the Mr. T version that we got with the original FF7 of Barret. We've kind of heard them talk about that before. We don't really need to cover that too much. Now, Britt does go on to say that she did do some research before, you know, stepping into the booth, which there's like mixed stuff on that. Some people like to do research, kind of see what's been done before. Some people like to not have, you know, any knowledge of what's previously been done with the character, how the character's been voiced in the past, so they can kind of have their own version of that.
I definitely did some research before I stepped into the booth about what had been done. I think it was in the beginning finding my version of Tifa, which was definitely a very collaborative process with our directors and the creative team. I think in the beginning it was slow as we kind of found where she was placed.
But she does go on to bring up a good point, because the original FF7, of course, there's no voice acting, right? So while there was voices for these characters in subsequent materials like Crisis Core, Advent Children, Kingdom Hearts, and stuff like that, right? The original game didn't have voices, so people have their ideas of what these characters kind of sound like, right? So it's kind of like nerve-wracking to like fill those shoes. Just compare it to like a book character, I assume like maybe being adapted into like a TV show or a movie or whatever. People have like ideas of what the characters sound like.
So it was nerve-wracking. It felt like really big shoes to fill, and especially because the original didn't even have voices. So it feels like similar to walking into a book, you know, a big IP where everyone has a different idea of how these characters might sound. So it was really intimidating. I had never done a huge IP like this. But it was a collaborative process. But I had definitely looked and seen, you know, the story and the characters and what had been established, and that was a great launching pad. But at the same time, I didn't want to just do an impression. I think for all of us, they encouraged us to make these characters our own.
About 10 or 11 minutes into it, we finally get some Hamaguchi. Now, he's asked about like the Xbox and Switch version of Intergrade, which is like not very exciting to talk about. I mean, it's cool that it's finally come to those platforms. I'm excited for those people that are on those platforms, right? But like, we're here for like part 3 stuff. That's what we're interested in, right? We're ready for fucking Remake Part 3. He does kind of tease that a bit about them, you know, working on Part 3 stuff. And he does throw out like the not too distant future shit, which we've been hearing a lot lately.
So yeah, we're working very hard on the third part of the trilogy right now, and even before then, the whole of the team are working together to really create this buzz, this excitement around the Final Fantasy VII Remake series. So yeah, looking forward to delivering that to you guys in the not too far future, and just asking, keep supporting us. Thank you so much for that.
He then goes on to say that somebody came up to him at the meet and greet and talked about like a rumor or something that Part 3 was canceled, and he obviously confirms that it's not, but like, what rumor? Like, why would that even... Like, there's never a world where Part 3 wasn't going to come out. Like, at all. I don't doubt Hamaguchi's story. I just don't know why somebody would think that or hear that. And why are you meeting the director for the remake trilogy that we already know is actively in development and asking him if Part 3 is being canceled? Like, it's just like a weird situation.
Yeah, so just want to clear this up. At the meet and greet we had out there, someone came up to me and said, "Oh, I've heard this rumor that development on the third game is being cancelled." And that is absolutely not happening. It is going ahead.
Post goes on to ask the voice actors what they enjoyed playing more, like the more heavy shit when it comes to like Rebirth, for example, or some of the more fun like interactions and funny moments with the characters. But he's talking about like character relationships, and he gets onto Kate Sith, which Paul Tento voices, and he pauses because he almost kind of goes into what Kate Sith is.
The friendships, Tifa and Aerith's friendship, Barret and Ruthie, how Kate is sort of like this little... Well, it's complicated. It's complicated. More on that in Game 3.
I thought that was a kind of funny but cool moment because he could have, unintentionally spoiled that for some people if they've never played the original FF7, right? Like, as of right now, after Rebirth, you don't totally know what Kate Sith is, right? And it's a reveal, I'll give you that. I don't know how they're going to necessarily handle it totally with, Part 3, but obviously if you're watching this channel, you're more than likely an FF7 fan, so you already know what the shit is, right? But with, like, Reeve being an Inspire, which I don't know how often they ever touch on that in like the wider compilation or lore for FF7, like how many Inspires are out there, I don't know. But you can like breathe life into inanimate objects. I don't know how that works exactly. But I do want like more of Reeve in our party, because we get that like with like Dirge of Cerberus, you get like, Vincent, Yuffie, Kate Sith, and like Reeve and shit a lot more. But with like the original FF7, we don't get much interaction with like the person Reeve in our party. They talk a little bit over like the PHS or something like that, or through Kate Sith or some shit, right? But I want to like see like Reeve in person, like talking with our party. That should be awesome. Paul mentions he like doing the like kind of brief serious moments with Kate Sith that you have in Rebirth, right? Because he's at like such a different level with Kate. The comedy stuff, he's like this high energy character. This facade he's got up, of course, that he's got to like act like. The moments like when he gets kicked out of the party in that gold sauce or whatever, and he talks about like, I thought we could have been friends, like when he's actually going to be like a serious version of Kate Sith. That was what he enjoyed, which definitely for me is what I like too. Like I expected the comedy shit from Kate Sith, obviously that's like the character, right? But when you get like the serious moments, other than like Temple of the Ancient stuff, like in the original game where he's like sacrificing himself and it's like this big emotional moment, or supposed to be, and then another Kate Sith just walks in and kind of ruins that, right? Kind of undermines it. Like those kind of moments are kind of whatever. It's still like a cool moment in Temple of the Ancients and Rebirth. But so John's asked about the Dine segment, which is one of the more emotional moments when it comes to Rebirth, right? And kind of how he gets in like the mindset for that, which you've heard him talk about before. It's a great story when he talks about it, right? He's cried about it a little bit in the past, which when I'm fucking doing this video and shit, it makes me kind of cry too. But like he references like his dad passing or something like that, and it's kind of how he gets in like the mindset for the character of Barret to do like the emotional moments. But Brianna lets us in on like the recording process a bit, how like day to day they don't even know what the hell they're doing. They're just walking in the studio, they don't get any like advanced scripts, they're just reading what's on the monitor, right? So like every single day it can be something different. You could be doing emotional shit one day, like funny shit the next day, like kind of maybe general dialogue one day, then emotional shit the next day, right? Like you're just kind of all over the place as you're recording, which has got to be like kind of complicated. But like she says, it's part of the fun of the job too.
So we go into the booth and we read the lines that are on the monitor. And that day, like we don't get a script ahead of time. We don't get any advanced knowledge of the story or the character arcs or anything like that. And that's part of the challenge, but also part of the fun of our job. We get to do something new every day.
It's kind of cool too that they don't really get like spoiled for what's happening in the story, right? Because they're recording shit probably out of order, out of sequence, right? But they're not getting like a full script of the game, and they're going to know from beginning to end what's going to happen in the third game, right? Like they're just kind of recording day to day. John also brings up that they don't get to record together, which I know I've seen like behind the scenes stuff for like movies and stuff over the years, and maybe games and shit too. Like sometimes shit is recorded together, like there'll be like 2 or 3 people in like a studio bouncing off each other, recording off each other and shit. But I know with them, they do the shit individually. Now I do know that they usually can get like context of the scene and like what they're supposed to be doing, how they're supposed to be, like the emotion they're supposed to be having and stuff. And I know they've said in the past that they get like the Japanese like recording or dialogue or something like that to kind of bounce off of sometimes.
We go in by ourselves. I know many people think we do it all together. We have our scenes. Everyone goes in individually. We have 4-hour sessions, and we go in and we do our thing, and the next person comes and they do their thing. So
Barret also talks about the recording out of sequence and not really knowing like where they're at in the game when they're recording this particular moment, right? And they kind of have to wait till the game actually releases, kind of like the fans, to really know what's actually happening overall in the story.
But we don't know anything. Like, even when we're recording, we're jumping all around the game. I remember, I think we got like a lunch at one point, and with Susie, and the three of us were like, so do you know how this game ends? A lot of the times we're right there with everyone else in terms of finding things out when the game is released.
And actually, Hamaguchi kind of weighs in on this topic as well, and he brings up the fact that they have the Japanese recordings and that they can kind of use that as well as reference.
So yeah, to just talk about what you just mentioned there about the fact that the voice actors actually record your parts individually rather than all together. So yeah, obviously I'm Japanese, the game's made in Japan, so we record the Japanese voiceover first. So yeah, obviously we have that Japanese version, which we could then, you guys on the English cast can use as a reference for kind of like the intonations, the emotional content of each of the lines of dialogue.
And it's great that they at least have the Japanese voice acting as like a reference instead of being just completely in the dark, right? Because even if you don't understand the language, as long as the emotion's there, you can understand at least the context of the scene for the most part. So the last like 15 or so minutes are questions from the audience, and the first guy just asks everybody in the audience to give like a standing ovation. People on stage, which is kind of cool. The next guy actually asked about like the restrictions they kind of went through with making the remake project, referencing like back in the day how like on the cartridge games, obviously there's a limitation to how much they could do, right? There's only so much memory on the cartridges, right? Hamaguchi's answer is pretty much their biggest restriction was the original FF7. Now, it's not really an answer to the guy's question, because I think he's more so asking like from a technical perspective, like, there's only so much memory on like a Blu-ray disc, right? Now, obviously, we have online so you can download like the other half of the game or whatever, so that's not really a thing anymore, but I think he meant more from like a technical perspective, what were your limitations? An example would be like with Rebirth, right? They can only make the zones so big, for example, right? You can't make a big, massive, seamless open world. It's kind of that, but not really that with Rebirth, right? That's like an example of an answer he could have given, sort of.
No, so I think the biggest restriction, the biggest hurdle we have when working on the remake series is the fact that there is an original version we have to work from. So yeah, from working on this whole project, the first two games, and it's exactly the same for the third game as well, is the fact that we have to make sure that we don't lose that perspective as a fan of the original game. That is very important, and we can't lose sight of that. But at the same time, we have to work out, well, how much can we change? How much should we change? And how much should we keep as exactly the same as the original? And drawing that line and making those distinctions and cutting that is obviously a very difficult challenge. We really have to think very hard about that each time. So yeah, I mean, as a series, as a game with so many fans out there, and obviously fans are different. So there's some people who, if we change it too much, they won't like that, they'll get angry at that. And then on the other side, there are people, if we don't change it enough, they may not like that either. So it really is a very fine balance we have to tread there. But again, we're trying to be positive and proactive about it and try and make the version of the game we think which will help appeal to and please as many people as possible in that. It's always a difficult line to draw though.
So I would say overall between Remake and Rebirth, they've done a great job. I have complaints about certain stuff, like the Whisperers, the Dying segment, for example, which they talked about a little bit in this, panel or whatever. I think overall is a great emotional moment and a great, dialogue and stuff between the characters, but also like boss fight is a little bit weird, and obviously like you don't get to like really relish in the moment, and then you're fighting Palmer and he's shaking his ass in the camera and he's on a frog mech and you're doing a fucking on-rails shooter afterwards. Like there's certain things that aren't handled so well in my opinion when it comes to like what they've done with the remake games here and there, but overall I think they've done a great job of striking the balance between new shit and old shit. The last question that's asked is to the voice actors and like the relationship with the character and how that's kind of evolved over the series, essentially from Remake to Rebirth, and I guess Crisis Core for the ones that are in Crisis Core, right? It's kind of interesting, but I don't think it's necessarily anything worth talking about, I would say. So as I talked about towards the beginning of the video, the conclusion is Hamaguchi teasing like release date for part 3 and obviously not delivering, but it's kind of funny.
Okay, so I kind of get the impression that everyone who's here today has probably already played Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and you probably want to know when the third game is coming out. Unfortunately, I can't tell you that today. But rest assured, it's going very well. We're working very hard on it. As soon as this panel finishes, I'm getting off stage, running straight back to my hotel, and I'm getting straight back to checking some of the levels in the game that we've already created.
With how much Hamaguchi keeps talking about part 3 throughout like these last like several months or so, right? Like I just feel like there's no way we get out of 2025 without something for part 3. Probably not a release date yet. We got to get something like the Game Awards, right? Like, good God, that's all he talks about in like every interview is part 3, which I love. Wouldn't this shit have been wild though if Hamaguchi just went rogue and just dropped the fucking release date right there? He's just like, fuck it, I don't give a shit, I'm the director, I do what the hell I want. And he's like, January 31st, 2027. Drops the mic and just walks off stage. I do want to say, though, that I think it's possible with the first reveal of Part 3 that they could maybe give us a release window, as in, like, the trailer, whether it's a teaser or a full-blown trailer, whatever, could conclude with, like, 2027 or something like that, right? Again, not an actual release date, but just kind of give us an idea when the game's coming out. But dudes, that'll be pretty much the video. That's everything from the Echoes of Midgar panel that I think we're talking about from the MCM Comic Con London. Shout out to TranceKuja for hooking us up with the video. Always appreciate people in the community who can hook us up with that shit. This video is long as hell, so we're just going to wrap it up. Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, so in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @DaveYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.